So these ones are all going to be required. I'm not going to go into too much of the details as far as how to update and edit these. You can look at the documentation on all of those. More importantly is how we would actually use this contact form. So this one, I can also set up a new view for it. So let's go into our views. And inside of forms, or inside of this import here, we want to add in contact form. All right. so just like what we did with home, I'm going to do something very similar. And I'm just going to put it right below home. And I'll call it define. I'm going to add some space so we can see everything. All right. And I'll define it as contact. And it's taking in a request. It's going to return render request. And I'll use a standard HTML template for forms. Call it forms.html. And context will be a context variable that we'll have to add in. So context equals to just an empty dictionary for now. And just like what we did up here is we'll have a form. So form for us is contact form. And just like what we did before, we're going to request.post or none. So this is getting that post data or none. And then we will add this form into this context. So form is equal to form. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got our view pretty much set up so we can at least render it. So let's quickly make a few other things. We're going to make the HTML template. And then we need a URL to actually go to this contact. So inside of our templates, we're going to go in here and we're going to save this as forms.html. All right. Okay, so now we've got a form. We have the HTML document. And it's all set up. So all this stuff's working great. Now we just need to set up our URL for the routing of, and it's all set up. So now we've got a form, change the value to be and contact request. I'll define. I'm going to add some space so we can see everything. All right, and I'll define it as contact. And it's taking in a request. It's going to return render request, and I'll use a standard HTML template for forms. Call it forms. And we need a URL to actually go to this contact. So inside of our templates, we're going to go in here and we're going to save this as forms.html. So here's the form itself. All right, so now I'll do
Every web, a masterpiece.
just hit change. So going into our form, we could add in to our first one, required equals to false, full name, and we can run that form again, and now full name is not saying required, right? So that's good. That's something we want to see. So now how do we use this? Well, going back to form is valid, we want to validate our form. So if form.isValid, well, we can't do the same thing that we did before. We're not saving it because it's not a model form. If it was a model form, we would have the ability to save it right off the bat. But this is just data that's coming through. So now what we want to do is actually get that data. So all I'll do here is I'll print the form. And we'll see what happens when I actually print the form, and more specifically, the cleaned data from the form. Okay, cool. So let's
Dangling by a thread.
try that out, and I'll say email, I'll say abc@gmail.eu, doesn't really matter, and message will say hello there. Hit submit. All right, nothing seems, errors are gone and all that, but we see this clean data. Cool. So that's actually coming through. What same thing that we did, trailing URL for content, and just event, and it's all set. Doesn't really matter, and message will say hello there. Hit submit. All right, nothing seems, errors are gone and all that. But we see this clean data. Cool. So that's actually coming through. And we can test that it's clean data. So ABC, we can just have it, our email as just ABC, and hit submit. And again, it's giving us that error of like, make sure this is an email. A slightly different error than what we saw before, but it's still the same error. So I'll say at gmail.com, go ahead and submit it. Cool, looks like it's printing out here. Great, so that's working. And that's a way to actually see this data. So one thing that I might want to actually add that same validator to my form that I did before, this clean email validator. Well, it's really easy. We can literally copy the exact same one and paste it above and make sure all your spacing is correct as according to Python. And let's go back into this contact and we'll say abc@gmail.com and say hello there and hit submit. Please enter a valid edu email address. Cool. So validation still works here. We don't need that, obviously. So
They will be purified. Watch this.
Find me greater foes. On the prowl. I got this.
I bring swift death. Everybody.
Find me greater.
delete it, especially not for a contact form. That doesn't make any sense. So now that we've got the validators working, we can now kind of think about how we might want to do this. Without going and creating a model and doing all this stuff, you might want to actually create a model to actually save this data but what we're going to do is just print it out. So the form valid, I'm first off going to say email equals to form.cleanedData.get and email. And then we can go through all of the email stuff here, and we'll say message equals to message, and full name is the last one, and full name, and there we go. And now we can print out, we'll print out each one of these. So we'll print out email, message, full name, print those out, do a quick refresh, confirm the form submission, and now it's printing out all three of those things. Now, of course, we don't have a full name, so if I said Justin as my full name, hit submit, now it's going to print that out too. So now we can do all sorts of things with this data, right? So this is a way to do a like more of a custom form that's not reliant on a model of any kind. Again, there's all kinds of fields you can do here. There's also things called widgets. So if you wanted a text area in this message, you could use what's called a widget. So you can look up
Run them through.
Shadows.
form widgets for something like that. It's not something we'll get into at this point, but there's all kinds of things that you can do with these forms. Another thing that you might consider doing is, instead of explicitly setting these like this, we could say for key value in form.cleanedData, print key value. Right, so we can set this out, go ahead and refresh there, run that through. Too many values to unpack, so we want to do print for key in form, and there we go, submit it, so we can actually see all the different keys, and then from there
Armed and ready.
there, we could say we can print the form.cleaned_data .get the key, and this would actually give us the key values. So we go ahead and submit it again, and there it goes. So that's a way, if you had a lot of fields in here, this would be a way to iterate through those fields just like that. It's fairly straightforward and fairly easy to do. And if you actually wanted to do key and value, you would simply add .iter items, and that will iterate the items in a easier form to work with, so that we could do key and value. And now you could do print key and value, and then we could just run through all of these. So let's go back into Chrome, submit the form, or refresh it, and this will allow us to actually go through all the data in a way that makes it a little bit easier on us. Cool. So that is using a custom form. Either method works. So like in a contact form, this is perfectly okay. You don't actually have to iterate through each one and try and figure out all that stuff, because if you're doing a contact form, you might want to send an email from here. So in the next one, we'll actually set up our site to send an email, or so this contact form actually does work. And then that send email you'd be able to use. Also, if the newsletter signed up, you can send an email to that newsletter recipient thanking them or confirming their email. Although we're not going to do the confirming email part, we're just really going to be doing the actual sending of email using a standard service like Gmail. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, let's keep going. Alright, so in this one, we're going to set up our Django project to be able to send email. This might change from time to time, so I definitely recommend that you take a look at the djangoproject.com for this in particular. The things that are probably going to change aren't really Django specific, but more of the settings